Hello everybody, Steve Griffiths here, developer of the MTPredictor software program. In yesterday's MTPredictor video I looked at how best to use MTPredictor as a means for doing your analysis on the markets only when the picture becomes clear, in other words not as a black box system. And today I'd like to have a look at another example using exactly the same techniques, but this time on a market that's a bit nearer to home, on one of the USE minis, the NQ. But as usual we start with the risk disclaimer and remind you that all examples in these videos should be considered as hypothetical. No trades were taken, they're just shown for illustration and training purposes only. Remind you there's a risk of loss in trading and investing. Put another way, all professional traders will know and understand, but more importantly accept that losses can and will and do unfold. We'll be looking at a losing trade a bit later in today's video. So let's now move over to a chart, and the chart I want to look at is a short-term 3-minute chart of the NQ yesterday. Now remember what I said basically in yesterday's video is that we're not looking to basically trade all our MTPredictor setups. We're basically looking to go to the higher time frame chart, then when the picture's clear, then move down to the shorter time frame to do our analysis and our potential trade setups. This is because the markets go in cycles, and basically only about 50% of the time or slightly less is the pattern clear, so the rest of the time basically any analysis is meaningless and shouldn't be done at all, and that applies to basically most trading approaches as well. Just to remind you also that you can do this kind of analysis on any markets and any time frames. There was a great trade on the British pound on a 4-hourly chart that I had a look at in a video a few weeks ago off that TS1 HG low there as well. So just because I'm doing a short-term chart today, it doesn't mean to say this does not apply to other markets and other time frames. If you're trading daily charts, you do the daily analysis with the higher time frame as the weekly. Right, so let's move out to the higher time frame. For this we go to a time frame between 3 and 5 time frames higher. So if our trade setups are on a 3-minute, we'd go out to the 15-minute. If they're say on a 15-minute forex, you'd go out to the hourly. If you look at daily charts, you'd go out to the weekly. Now our DP zones can be on the chart in advance. So I want to just go back before yesterday had even opened. Okay, yesterday was April the 4th. Now can you see how we had a pivot low here on our 15-minute chart? This is our 15-minute chart. So we right mouse click, we do decision point. Now can you see how that gave an area of potential support, but it's there in advance? So this was on the chart before the market even opened. If I turn training mode off, can you see what happened during the day? In that basically the market came down, found support right at this DP support zone before rallying nicely. In fact, that's now the low of the day for you very nicely as well. So now when we go down to the shorter time frame chart, you can see that's exactly what it looks like. There's our 15-minute support, nailing the low of the day. We can now look for trade setups that fall in the direction of the large degree trend. So with support coming here, the large degree trend is then up. So we'd be looking for buy setups, in other words our TS1 buy setup here, and not our TS3 HG sell here, even though our MTP trend was grey straight in the process of going blue. So that's what we're looking to do. So in other words, this is a good particular trade setup to take, because can you see how it's in the direction of our new large degree trend, and that picture is nice and clear. We also had a very clear picture on the ES as well. There you can see that the 15-minute DP on the ES nailed the low of the day as well, and the large degree trend was up. So obviously our MTP trend went blue, and you'd be looking for buy setups, not sells. But we're looking at the NQ. So with right mouse click over our blue buy bar, place analysis on, and you can see there was a potential 2.6R trade at the first target. Now this was a bit of a unique trade setup because we'd come off a larger degree support. This is where we use our Elliott wave analysis in isolation. So we start our Elliott wave sequence here. So the initial rally up will be deemed a wave 1. The initial correction of wave 2, and this is what we call our, or used to be called our Holy Grail trade setup. We're now renaming it to our wave 3 setup, and that means that this is a potential wave 2. So rather than coming out at the first target, you'd be looking to come out at the typical wave 3 WPT. This was actually found automatically. If we go down to a slightly shorter time frame, you can see it's found out automatically here by having an HG set up here. Again, we're going to rename this to W3 or wave 3 fairly shortly. So I'll right mouse click on the blue buy bar, place the analysis on, and you can see the logical first target would be the typical wave 3 WPT, because we're looking for a wave 1, a wave 2, then a wave 3 swing. Remember, we use position sizing to keep our initial risk small and under control. In this case, it would mean going long a one contract to risk less than 2% on a sample $20,000 account. But the beautiful thing about this trade, and it's the one that one of my personal favourites, is because we go to the typical wave 3 WPT target, which is the typical area of where wave 3s are likely to end, the profits are normally large in relation to the initial risk. In this case, it would be a nice profit of plus 7.7R, or almost heading towards 8 times greater than the initial risk. So that would be the first trade of the day, which would be a very good one indeed. If we go back to the 3-minute chart, whoops, so there it is, the same 7.6, 7.7R profit. If we go back to the 3-minute chart, where was this market likely to go to? Well, again, if we go out to the higher time frame chart, we can place the next resistance area on, which again, if we go back to the last pivot high, which would have been here as the market started to rally, so we right mouse click, do our DP. Again, this would have been on the chart in advance, so before the market even got there, this would be a potential area for potential resistance. So as you can see, the market did actually exceed this a bit later in the day, but before that it hadn't reached it, therefore the large view trend was still up. So what happened a bit later in the day? Well, obviously I've discussed this sell setup and how we wouldn't want to be taking sell setups. There's another one here, again against our blue MTP trend, and we hadn't reached this target. The market then rallied up here. If I right mouse click here, do Elliott Wave Intermediate, this is a bit more of an advanced use of our MTPredictor software program. You can see the market rallied in a 5-wave sequence off that TS1 buy setup. On a completed 5-wave sequence, the initial target is normally the DP off the prior wave 4, so the DP support zone off here. Again, this would have been on the chart in advance. And can you see how the market came down into this level? Remember, this would have been on the chart before the market even got there, preparing you in advance for potential support, where we had a VS or volume spike setup. The volume spike setup is where we have an unusually high volume, where the market reverses beyond an important psychological high or low. Now normally we like this to be a major high or low, but in this case I've looked at this particular scenario in the past. In this one it's quite unique because it comes in at the prior wave 4 after a completed 5-wave sequence, so this would be one where you could consider a long trade. Again, if we look at our MTP trend, it's blue, and also because we hadn't reached this DP resistance here, the large view trend was also up. So we right mouse click over the blue buy bar, and again that would have given us another trade set up into the first target, which also fell in the area of the higher time frame resistance, so this would be a good place to look to bank your profit. Here the profit was approximately 3.6R, or 3.6 times greater than the initial risk. So far today, can you see how by looking at the higher time frame support and resistance zones, we first of all nailed the low of the day, defined the large view trend as up, the picture was clear. So we then are able to come down into our shorter time frame to look at our potential trade setups. We had one wave 3 trade setup off here for a nice 7.7R profit. Then we had another trade setup here for a potential 3.6R profit. Then we actually had a sell setup a bit later in the day. Can you see this one here? We have a history triangle. These are great because these show you trade setups that would have happened at the time. So if I use our training mode, I go back, can you see how that would have been a DP sell at the time? At the time this would have looked to be a good trade setup because it was unfolding at our high time frame resistance. Our MTP trend was grey, therefore this would be one you would have considered at the time. Again, our position sizing takes care of the initial risk, but if I move forward, turn training mode off, you can see this would have been stopped out for a loss. Yes, losses can and will and do unfold. This is what I said at the start of the video. The important thing is keeping the losses small. This is why we use position sizing. In this case, this loss would be what we call one risk unit. Can you see how that even though this was a losing trade, at one risk unit this was kept small in relation to prior profits of this one at plus 3.6R and this one of, we went to the typical wave 3 WPT, plus 7.6 or 7.7R. So hopefully this has been a good video to show you how we use MTPredictor. In other words, we're not looking to trade 100% of the time. We're looking to trade when the pattern's clear and we do this by first looking for the higher time frame chart and support and resistance on our DP zones on the higher time frame chart. When the market is behaving itself and basically making meaningful support and resistance at these higher time frame levels, as you can see, this is what it did here. It perfectly came off that 15-minute support zone to now the low of the day for you yesterday. That means the picture is clear. Therefore, we can go down to the shorter time frame charts, in this case looking for buy setups as the market is anticipated to rally off support. We had our first trade setup there, either on the 2-minute chart or the 3-minute chart, where we came into either what we used to call a holy grail, or now we rename it to a wave 3 trade setup, where we're looking to trade the Elliott wave 3. And as you can see, that produced a very nice 7.6, 7.7 hour profit. We then used a bit more advanced analysis to see our 5-wave sequence going up into the high, and then found our VS trade setup that came in at the DP from the prior wave 4, again in the direction of the large trend, for another 3.6 hour profit, and also ended the day with a potential losing trade there. So hopefully a good example of how best to use MTPredictor, and that is when the picture's clear, and how we start off on the higher time frame charts for support and resistance, then come down to the shorter time frame charts. And as you can see on the NQ yesterday, with a combination of 3 and 15-minute charts, with a look at the 2-minute, we had some very nice trade setups, and it was a very good day indeed for MTPredictor.